January 2026. Elmendorf-Richardson Air Force Base, Alaska. A pilot designated Falcon 1, call sign assigned to the 3rd Wing's first operational EPAWSS evaluation flight, sits in a classified briefing room. The intelligence officer places a folder on the table. Inside, 18 months of PLAAF J-20 radar intercepts, collected over the South China Sea. The J-20s weren't hunting targets, they were hunting signatures. Specifically, the radar signature of the F-15C Eagle. Falcon 1 stares at the data. His unit flies the F-15EX. The question on the page in front of him is simple. Has China already mapped a counter to the Eagle 2 before it ever reaches the fight? The answer determines whether the 3rd Wing survives the first 48 hours of a Taiwan contingency. We'll come back to Falcon 1 and what that intelligence brief actually concluded. But to understand why a single radar profiling operation changed how the Air Force thinks about the F-15EX's role in the Pacific, you need to know what happened 18 months earlier and what Boeing promised the Eagle 2 could do that its predecessor never could. The F-15C entered service in 1976. For 30 years, it was the standard for air superiority. Its APG-82 radar was state-of-the-art. Its kill ratio in combat, above 100 to 0. But by 2020, the airframe was aging. The radar was consuming maintenance hours at a rate the Air Force couldn't sustain, and the threat environment had changed. China had deployed the J-20. The F-15C had no electronic warfare suite capable of countering 5th-generation sensor fusion. The Air Force faced a decision: retire the Eagle entirely, or replace it with something that could survive in a contested Pacific environment long enough to matter. Boeing's answer was the F-15EX Eagle 2. The pitch wasn't that it could defeat a J-20 in a within-visual range engagement. The pitch was more specific. The Eagle 2 would function as a sensor truck, a platform capable of carrying more weapons than any other tactical fighter in the inventory, while providing the 3rd Wing and eventually F-22 units with a radar picture of extraordinary fidelity. The centerpiece of that argument was the APG-82 VEEP-1 active electronically scanned array radar. Here's what the APG-82 actually does. A traditional mechanically scanned radar physically rotates its antenna to change direction. Response time is measured in fractions of a second, which sounds fast until you're tracking a target maneuvering at Mach 1.8. The APG-82 has no moving parts. It steers its radar beam electronically, shifting between dozens of tracks simultaneously, updating faster than any mechanical system can follow. The mean time between failure for the APG-63 radar on the F-15C was 400 hours. The APG-82's mean time between failure is rated at 10,000 hours. What that means in combat: an F-15EX pilot can trust his radar picture in a way F-15C pilots never could. In a high sortie rate conflict over the Pacific, that availability gap compounds into a structural advantage within the first 72 hours. The most surprising thing about this program isn't the radar specifications. It's how the Air Force framed the Eagle 2's role from the start. This aircraft was never sold as a replacement for the F-22. It was sold as a force multiplier for it. The Eagle Passive Active Warning Survivability System, EPAWSS, is where the F-15EX's sensor architecture gets strategically interesting. The F-15C flew for decades with a legacy electronic warfare suite. It could detect radar emissions. It couldn't build a comprehensive electronic order of battle, a real-time picture of every emitter within combat range, their types, their locations, their threat priority. EPAWSS changes that. The system provides 360-degree coverage, identifies emitters across a broad frequency range, and feeds that data not just to the pilot, but to a data-linked network. In practical terms, an F-15EX with EPAWSS active isn't just protecting itself. It's mapping the battle space for every other platform on the network, including the F-22s operating inside the threat envelope ahead of it. That matters because the F-22's own electronic warfare picture, while sophisticated, has limitations at range. The Raptor was designed for deep penetration. The Eagle 2 was designed to fill the outer sensor ring. Now consider what China has been doing in parallel. The J-20 Mighty Dragon entered operational service with the PLAAF in 2017. As of July 2026, the PLAAF operates an estimated 240 J-20 airframes across multiple regiments, with production accelerating following the introduction of the WS-15 emitting engine in late 2024, which resolved the thrust deficiency that had constrained early J-20 performance envelopes. The J-20 carries up to 4 PL-15 beyond visual range missiles internally, with an estimated effective range of 200 to 300 kilometers. That range matters. It means a J-20 can engage an F-15EX before either pilot achieves visual contact. The RAND Corporation's 2025 Pacific Campaign Analysis, released in declassified summary form to congressional defense committees, modeled a Taiwan contingency across 17 scenario variants. In 15 of 17, PLAAF fighters achieved beyond visual range engagement opportunities against non-stealth U.S. platforms within the first combat cycle. The F-15EX is not a stealth aircraft. Its radar cross-section is not classified as low observable. That is not a design flaw. It is a doctrinal choice with consequences. Put yourself in Falcon 1's position. You're flying a non-stealth airframe into an environment where the adversary's primary missile has a range advantage over your own AIM-120D AMRAAM in tail chase geometry, and where 18 months of radar profiling has given the J-20 regiment detailed knowledge of what your platform's emission signature looks like. The question isn't whether you're detectable. The question is whether your sensor advantage, your electronic warfare suite, and your network connectivity make you survivable long enough to execute your mission. The avionics answer that question directly, but not in the way that makes for comfortable briefings. Subscribe to Air Force. Next week, we're breaking down China's 6th-generation fighter program, what the J-36 demonstrator flights actually tell us about PLAAF doctrine, and why the timeline is closer than the Pentagon publicly acknowledges. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. The Air Force's Agile Combat Employment Doctrine, ACE, which drives Pacific basing strategy as of 2025, is built on dispersion. Spread aircraft across dozens of austere bases throughout the first and second island chains. Deny the PLAAF a concentrated target set. The F-15EX, with its 2,9,500-pound payload capacity, the highest of any tactical fighter in the U.S. inventory, is optimized for that environment. It can carry 20 AIM-120D missiles on a single sortie, 20. The F-22 carries 8 internally. The F-35A carries 8. In a long-duration air campaign where missile expenditure is the primary constraint, the Eagle II's capacity isn't a secondary consideration. It's the central one. One detail from the Jane's Defense Weekly Assessment, published in March 2026, that stuck with me. The Eagle II's role in queuing collaborative combat aircraft, the unmanned wingmen, the Air Force's fielding alongside manned platforms, was described as potentially more significant than its direct engagement contribution. An F-15EX with EPAWSS providing electronic order of battle data to a flight of CCAs, each carrying additional AIM-120Ds, creates a combat geometry the J-20 wasn't designed to counter. The J-20's sensor fusion architecture assumes a 2-ship or 4-ship human threat. A networked human-machine formation of 12 to 16 platforms presents a tracking problem the PL-15 engagement sequence wasn't optimized for. Here's the take that will probably generate disagreement. The F-15EX's greatest vulnerability isn't its radar cross-section or its sensor limitations. It's the doctrine that places it in the outer engagement ring of a Taiwan contingency as the platform that absorbs initial J-20 sensor attention, while F-22s maneuver into firing position from stealth. That role works tactically. It's uncomfortable institutionally because it assigns the highest attrition position in the battle formation to the aircraft flown by the pilots of the 3rd Wing at Elmendorf-Richardson. Follow that logic to its end, and the Eagle II is a capable, well-armed, electronically sophisticated aircraft being used as a decoy with better odds than a pure decoy. That's not how Boeing pitches it. That's what the ACE doctrine documents describe. Does that trade-off reflect sound strategic calculus? Or is it asking too much of a platform that was never designed for that mission? Comment below. The Third Wing's first operational EPAWSS evaluation, conducted over the Gulf of Alaska in February 2026, ran against legacy threat emitter replication systems designed to replicate J-20 and S-400 radar profiles. The results remain classified at the secret level. What was publicly confirmed in a Pacific Air Force's press release dated March 4, 2026. The evaluation was completed on schedule, all test objectives were met, and the Eagle II's electronic warfare integration with F-22 units from the 477th Fighter Group performed within expected parameters. That is the language of a program that did not fail its first operational test. Back to the intelligence brief Falcon 1, received in January 2026. What it actually concluded was this. The J-20 radar profiling of F-15C signatures was confirmed. 18 months of collection had produced a targeting dataset optimized for legacy Eagle radar emissions. The F-15EX's APG-82 operates on different emission modes, different waveforms, different frequency agility patterns than the APG-63. The profile the PLAAF collected is not a profile of the aircraft Falcon 1 flies. That gap is real. That gap is the margin the Third Wing is operating inside. Whether it's sufficient margin for what comes next is the question no one in the Pentagon will answer on record. The F-15 has been flying since 1972. It has never been shot down in air-to-air combat. The Eagle II is not the aircraft that flew those missions. It carries more missiles, sees further, picks up more of the electronic environment, and survives more maintenance cycles than anything that came before it wearing that airframe. The pilots who flew the F-15C know what the numbers can't fully capture. The pilots flying the Eagle II know what the new numbers mean. The question is whether the sensor war the Air Force believes it's winning translates into the outcome the Pacific demands. The APG-82 sees first. EPAWSS maps the environment. The CCA wingmen carry the extra missiles. The F-22s maneuver into position behind the sensor picture the Eagle II provides. The Eagle II is ready. The doctrine is set. The J-20 force is larger than it was 2 years ago, and it's still growing. The gap is real. For now. If you want to understand what happens when that gap closes, comment, yes. We read everyone.